Yes. And ANJAN, or maybe you will tell that you were in Germany at this time, but you heard and your mind was in Ghana, probably. I would like also to call on stage a cinephile, an expert, a friend of European, Indian, Bengali cinema, RAMAN. So after this kind of masterpieces, it's also, I think, a need to express, to share what we felt, the message of this movie. So it is what we are going to do. It is the specificity of this festival, because after each screening at 6 p.m., there is a discussion that follows the screening. Just for your record, for your agenda, so tomorrow is the short movie night at Alliance Française du Bengal at 9 p.m. There is also a movie screen at 1:30 p.m. With a presentation of Ritu Parmasandita. And the 1st of March is the closing ceremony here at NANDAN at 6 p.m. So, dear ANJAN, dear Raju, the floor is yours, and thank you so much for your presence. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. Anju and I had the opportunity to see this film after several years, after decades. And all the scenes come back vividly to memory again. But the thing is, one is astonished at how relevant this film is even today. See, we are talking of a film which was made in 1982 and which got the Jury Prize in Cannes. This whole problem, there is no story like a narration that goes in progression, yet the film keeps you gripped all through while it is on the screen. It's only describing a kind of situation, it's asking a lot of questions, it is making us ask a lot of questions. So, when you did the film, what was the brief that was given to you? This whole middle class habit of creating a class system of somebody to help in the household. In those days, the term servant was very common, but nowadays we have become very politically correct, and we have graduated the vocabulary to domestic help, right? So what do you think? Has anything changed since then now? Is it the same problem that exists today? Has it spread to other areas as well? Is this a film which can be called a hunger film? Is it a film which can be called Why is that microphone misbehaving? You can use this. Yeah, you can use this, it's okay. হ্যাঁ ওটাকে একটু কমাতে হবে এই তুমি এটা না অঞ্জন
Actually, Mr. Raman, no, I don't think much has changed. Of course, as you say, we become more politically correct. We try to avoid minor people, young children for domestic help. We try to avoid that. But in my house, I have 2 maidservants, and they don't live there, and then another manservant, and I'm calling them servants because they are. It's no point in trying to make it sound different. But I still know of a lot of people who prefer to have younger staff, let's say staff now for them, because apparently they are available and they're useful. I don't know. There are some people who prefer young boys, mainly boys, working in household, in the restaurant, in local shops and other places. But apart from that, I don't think that so long as hunger or this society remains in this consumerist society, I don't think that this kind of situation can be avoided. And because basically it is pointing a finger at the consumerism. If you notice in the beginning, we are discussing, me and my wife are discussing whether we need a fridge or we need a television or we need a whatever, own your own flat, and at the end she says, no, I need a servant boy. So we are discussing consumerism. So I think so long as this society, the economic structure remains this way, there will always be people from the villages who will come to the city for work. The educated will find themselves in a slightly better position, and then the less will be employed in households or other small shops. In my city, there are a lot of other things have changed, but I don't think, Mr. Raman, I think one can still make a movie on a maid servant. I still think one can make a fascinating movie on a private driver. I think so, Or I have to keep a security person at the gate, and I know the kind of terrible situation he comes from, and he's just a security person. He's just there to look after the unnecessary people don't disturb us. So I know that what kind of a place where he comes from, and then he changes over. I still think that such a story or such a film is still possible to me.
Do you think there is a kind of a positive side to it also, that this provides an opportunity for the people from the rural areas to come to urban areas to earn something for their family? So in a way, it is a kind of an employment opportunity. What has probably changed now is that they are not only coming from the Mofussil areas to the nearest cities, but are also migrating to other states because it is more lucrative to go to other states. So the trend is very much there, because this kind of the akanka of all these people also to be able to afford things in life will keep them driving to earn that bit of money which can give them a label of affordability for certain things. And wherever it is more lucrative, of course, wherever the grass is greener, that cuts across barriers. It doesn't restrict itself to a particular class. It's even with the middle class and the upper class. They also migrate to places where they find that they can earn more and can afford more. So, don't you think there is a positive side to it? It's a kind of employment, natural employment generation.
Of course it is, because of course, if the boy wouldn't have died, then Haran would have benefited. So it's just that he dies. But there is no obvious exploitation being shown. But deep within there is indirectly, of course, the society has to have its orders changed for them to not get into a situation like this. But as you are saying, of course it is an opportunity. My father saw the film and was very angry. I still remember, he went and saw the film the first day he was invited, he saw it and said, well, he walked out and he told MRINAL, said, what do you think? You won't keep a servant? You want me to throw my servant out? What a rubbish! What utter rubbish I can tell.
And was your father a lawyer also?
Yes, my father. And MRINAL turned around and said, hey, no, I have a boy working in my house. Don't worry, I have a boy, and he's a minor. so don't keep shouting. So that was the kind of situation. So, I mean, I think that Mrinal Sen was aware of the necessity, and yet he tried to point a finger at the issue or the bourgeois society that is, in a way, they are answerable to what has happened. So I personally think that still today, I find while I was watching it, I've watched it many times, and I still find it very, very political. I think it's one of Mrinal Sen's finest work. Of course, if there are 5, 6 of them, I still put KHARIJ as one of his finest political films. And he used to say, he used to always say that, people used to say that Mrinal Sen made very political films and then made human document, then turned to human document. But I personally, when I look back and I see his earlier films were, this political phase was a very obvious kind of phase. It was not deeply political. I think the case is closed, but KHARIJ is essentially very, very political because it is so human. I suppose you understand.
No, the thing is, you're very right that Mrinal Sen's films have been very, very political. Otherwise, yeah, okay, right. They have been very political, but the earlier films have been kind of political in a different way. They have been political in a very forthright manner, political in a kind of agit-prop manner, whereas with advancing years and in his films have become political in the sense that they have raised which need to be addressed, to bring about change, but at the same time, it also reflects a kind of helplessness of not being able to do anything about it, because this morality of the middle class or the bourgeois or the upper class is something that is accepted. The title of the film itself, which says KHARIJ, like in a court parlance where a case is being heard, a case is being made, and then for lack of sufficient evidence, you don't prosecute anybody, and the case is closed, right? It's absolutely closed. So in that sense, I think there are things which are violating the law, like child labor case, certain other things too in the peripheral area. There is a huge rural-urban divide, which comes to light very much in a neutral space like the crematorium when we finally see that, or when they are entering the house after coming back from the crematorium. And these are things which are kind of accepted in society because we don't think it is wrong to do certain things like this. So, where do you think we are going wrong over here?
I think that, which I initially, after the film was made, I was not really aware of it because I was not here at that time. You were in Maximum Amava, Poetry Institute. I was with the theatre manufacturer in Berlin. I left West Berlin, so I couldn't go to Cannes and I couldn't see the final product. But he called me up and he told me to take a train, but I couldn't make it. But sitting in Purfusudam, in a restaurant on a TV, I saw Mrinal Sen getting the award, and it was very, very interesting for me. But today, or maybe before, when I saw it, when I was later in my life, when I was working with him, I saw it again and again, right, in different places. I think the point to which this film, the interesting part of this film, why I say it's political, because I'm not necessarily humanist kind of a document, is because I think political cinema, for me, political cinema is about questioning and raising questions and not answering questions. And I kept telling Mrinal Sen that your earlier films were answering too many questions. I think from Padapik, The Foot Soldier, you started raising questions. And KHARIJ raises questions more than answers it. As Mr. Raman said in the beginning, it's just an incident which is going through certain issues and certain an incident leads to other incidents, leads to other incidents. It is not a very well-rounded. It is just questions being raised. They had a room. Where we are going to? We had a room. ANJAN and Mamata had an extra room. They couldn't give it. They couldn't give it to the servant because there was a servant staying there who had stolen something from there. So these are things which are very interesting. And then again, we get to hear that perhaps Palan was mixing in bad company and he was going wrong, he was going to the movies. So again, these are moral questions which are being raised after the incident is over. If the incident wouldn't have happened, if Palan would not have died, they wouldn't have, I don't think they would have cared whether Palan went to a morning show or an evening show or Paul. It is that they had rooms, they had a place to live, they had an extra blanket. So I think he is trying to, without making the person obviously guilty, I think Mrinal Sen is trying to point a finger at himself, his class, at you, at everyone. About there are the moral questions which sometimes we avoid. We avoid the moral issues, moral questions. Do we have the same food? Do we share the same food? Do we share the same facilities? The toilet, So I think that is the most interesting and political part of the film or aspect of the film, that it raises these questions and lets you free, and you are there to think about it. You think about it and you come to your understanding of society. And which I think Mrinal Sen started, just previously, I think 2-3 films earlier, he started this asking himself questions, or this introspective phase of Mrinal Sen, which made him, I think, a far, far better filmmaker. Just to go back to the first question, whether there was some brief, whether we are given or not, I would like to add that I was not supposed to act in this film. I just acted with him in one film. I was too young, I was doing. It was actually shot in 81. Just after we came back from Venice, it was shot in 81, and it was released or sent to Cannes or whatever in 82. So in 81, I was 26 and a half or something. So I was not supposed to do this, and a very well-known actor of a certain repute was supposed to play the role. It is after coming back from doing Chalchitro or the Kaleidoscope from Venice that he felt that I was reliable and he wanted to work with me, and he said, "You do this role." I said, No, impossible. I don't want to act as a father. Though I was married and had a little child in real life, but on the screen I was very thin and I couldn't even lift up the boy. There was a shot you must have seen that I lift up the boy only once, and I'm having a bad time behind Mamata. So he was very thin. So I didn't want to play the father. I said, no, I can't play this. But he insisted, and his Swedish agent or distributor, Eliane Stuterheim, she just died last month. She was very old. I think she was almost 100. I think she was 98 or something. So she just died last month. Eliane was insisting and saying, no, let ANJAN do this. So I was forced to wear Mrinal Sen's clothes. So all the shawls you see and the polo neck, sweater, turtleneck is all Mrinal Sen's. It's things which he used to wear outside when he used to go in foreign festivals. So these things I was made to look a little heavy, but I was 26 and a half and almost 27. At the last moment I was cast. And the difference between the first film and this film is the first of Charlie Chitro. Mrinal Sen had a see, you see the film and you think it's such a well-written script, isn't it? Yeah. You think it's such a beautifully written script. And he come in. What? He's come. Who? Palan's father. When? In the afternoon. How? Look at the character. You know, it's such a well-written script. One line. When I come back and I find out that Baba has come. But believe me, it was all written. It was a slightly different script. Some of the scenes which we shot were completely improvised. He said, don't say these lines, say something like this, say something like this. And every day on the sets, it was a very intense situation. He was very intense. I remember that, and probably that is what was the brief, what I got. He said, you just behave, you don't do anything else. And I'll tell you, I'll inform you, I'll let you know when you're feeling bad, but just behave, don't do anything. So, and he said, I don't like this line, I change it, let's change this, Mama, you say this. And sometimes he used to act in rehearsals, we did the rehearsals when he was playing Mamata and I was playing Anjan, and sometimes he used to play Anjan and I used to play Mamata. Sitting around and just doing the dialogues. And the entire dialogue changed. And that is the beauty, I think, of working with Mrinal Sen, is that he was so good at improvising, and with actors, if he had actors, he could improvise so well that it almost became like a well-written scene. But it was all done on the floor. It was actually done on the floor. And there are moments when I got angry and I said, I was not saying this line, he was not cutting the camera. He just kept the camera going. And she said that, আমি বললাম যে তুমি বলেছো? No. আমি বলতে পারি। He was not cutting the camera. He was not cutting the shot. So I just said, I বলতে হবে, সমস্ত I বলতে হবে। Cut. Right. Let's go. So sometimes he made us talk like that. And it was he who could do it, not just because I was in the character. He knew that certain things I would do. Mamata, apparently, in that beautiful scene where she talks about where she just আমার কাছে একটা প্যান্ট চাইতে এসেছিল, অদ্ভুত লাগে, she kept on. But he was not cutting. অস্বস্তি লাগে, এই তো সেই ওটা করলো। These are not lines written by Mrinal Sen. This was something that Mamata was doing, obviously with his Mrinal Sen, like a bolichi, and he was inspiring her to do it, and that is why it's so believable. And there, of course, there are certain places where he absolutely wrote the lines. What I'm trying to say is that I just tried to make you go through the process of what he was going through. Is he was trying to make a different kind of film, and he was approaching it, and the way he was making it during the shooting was very intense. It was not the fun-loving Mrinal Sen. The moment the shooting was over, it was fun-loving Mrinal Sen. But during the shooting, he was very intense, and little things used to matter.
So would you say that this phase of films, there was a new radicalism and an insightful kind of investigation into bourgeois psychology and behavior in moments of crisis, particularly? What does the middle class do? How do they react? All the people around, because it's not the only film which shows that kind of a situation. Ek Din Pratidin deals with this kind of a situation. Ek Din Achanak deals with this kind of a situation. So this is the phase where he is trying to investigate also how does the middle class behave in a situation where there's a crisis, where there's an emergency. That's the way I look at it, this phase of films. So would you agree when I say that it's a new kind of radicalism that crept into his filmmaking, which maybe made him more intense on the sets?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because you know Mrinal sir, he was funny, he was witty, and I think this word is very interesting. It's a new sense of radicalism. Mrinal would have loved. Mrinal likes word. He loved words and things. So word plays. He would have loved this word. It was new sort of radicalism. Yes, I completely agree that here he come with Agni Pradinin, KHARIJ, Kandahar, Ek Din Achanak. He had walked into a different kind of a radical period of his life, whether he didn't care a damn about parties and partisanism. Of course, he was aware of what is happening around the world, but he didn't give a damn about it. He was more concerned. He knew that he was a radical, and he was always a radical. But he was concerned with himself. So he was questioning himself. So he was bothered about himself. So he was portraying actually himself. So he was a representative of the bourgeois or the petty bourgeois. That is why my title is Sen. It is not Dutt. It is Doctor. It is Sen. And it is like saying that I am part of that. And I would feel at certain times he got very annoyed, and during KHARIJ that there are certain things where I felt a little too guilty. I looked around and said, why are you doing this? Why are you acting like this? He was very funny at certain times. That is why he just shouted at us. So I said, no, I just felt like lowering my head. He said, no, don't, just look up. Because I felt that, okay, so he wouldn't have felt that. And there are certain times when I looked down, he was very happy because I saw there were tears in his eyes from behind the camera, but he is also looking down. So he was identifying. He was identifying with me, Mamota, the landlord, the lawyer, all the others. He never identified with the father. The father was an outsider to him. He was guilty towards the father. But as a person, during shooting or after the shooting, you understand what I mean? He identified with his class. And similarly when later on in his later films like Ek Din Achanak, when I was assisting him, or Mahaprithvi, where I worked with him, he also became that very intense, radical person who was investigating in himself. So he perhaps was the father who is mediocre and he leaves the family. So he looked at himself. Srinarayan was himself.
No, you said kind of intensity that went into the making of these kind of films, and that he saw himself. Possibly he spilled over onto the screen also. Maybe that is the reason why there is so much use of cigarettes on the screen also.
Yes.
And the ashtrays,
Yes.
the slice of Mrinal Sen spilling over onto the screen, is it?
Yes. And it's obviously the people he was working with were very close associates. His wife was there, you saw his wife. And we were already I was probably more fresh, one film old, but still I had worked with him, Mamata had worked with him, the people had worked with him. So, as a police officer, everybody had worked before. So he was very comfortable in owning us. So he kept owning. He kept owning Nasir or Shabana in Khanda. And which Nasir also told me that, this guy, man, he is like, ये तो direction नहीं दे रहा है तो मेरे को own कर रही है. He's telling me, put your hand here, put your hand here. It's my hand here. So I said, Nasir, it's his hand. He's like thinking your hand is his hand. Put your hand like this, put your hand like this. And Nasir got one. Didn't tell him. He said, he's catching me here, pushing me here. So Vinata was like that. I think this phase he owned. And whenever he made a not so good film, he said it was a bad film after that. And he was very proud of the films which was good. So he was very honest, I think. I think, from Agin Pratibhin, Mrinal said, I'm not saying he was dishonest earlier. He was a great filmmaker. He was a new wave film. He brought the new wave to India. He was experimenting with form. He was fearless. He was adventurous. But post Agin Pratibhin, I think he was very deeply, because he found success, he found name, he found acknowledgement from the world. It is after having found all this, I think Mrinal Sen started then questioning and becoming a far more deeper person, rather than flaunting his style anymore. Because he's already achieved it. And because he was such a radical, because probably he had struggled so much that he didn't feel, he let success now hit him rather than success. He was questioning his own success. Whether I'm worthy, what have I done? These are thoughts which I've shared with him also. He was questioning his success. He was questioning also the little bit of money and whatever he had made, the flat, his car, everything. He was questioning. Whenever he bought a new fridge, I think post KHARIJ, just towards the end of KHARIJ, I must say this, towards the end of KHARIJ, a new fridge was brought to the house. And his editor used to come. Editor was a slightly, he was not doing very well. He built a house, and his editor was Gangadhar Noshkar, and Gangadhar Noshkar was not doing very well at that point of time. And Gangadhar Noshkar made it a point to come there and say, Mrinalda, I want a glass of cold water. I was good. So what can I go and get? He realized he was ashamed. He was ashamed that he had a Frigidaire, new Frigidaire. And Gangadhar, his editor, didn't have a Frigidaire at home. And he had a car, and Gangadhar didn't have a car. And he was more annoyed with himself rather than trying to please Gangadhar and say that, yes, come on. Why do you want to do?
Yeah, but that kind of shame also over a little bit here, because at the beginning when you are asking Mamata, you're thinking about what you want, a car, and so, and you also mention a TV, but then it gets demoted to radiogram later on. TV was something too ambitious and too high.
Yeah, and I'm saying these things because Mrinal would have said these things also. He was unabashedly human. So sometimes when he felt ashamed, he got angry rather than so that I remember that Frigidaire part of it. And so when he got more and more successful, as he got more and more successful, I think he started more and more questioning, more and more probing. Right at the end, towards the end of his life, when he was very successful and he was not making any films, he decided to make a film about people not communicating, that what is the point of making cinema? I mean, he also told me that there is no point in making films. I said, then what are you saying? How can you say? By the time I was a great friend of Mrinal Sen and a very close associate, I said, what are you saying? He said, what is the point? Because does one communicate? Do I communicate with you? I said, of course you do communicate with you. And it was not depression. It was questioning. A certain kind of questioning went into Agin Pratibhin, a deeper questioning. It got deeper with Akalesh Sandhane, more deeper with KHARIJ. So it was self-questioning, which was, I think he was quite brutal with himself. But because he was such a witty man, as you all know, some of you, and of course Mr. Raman, he was such a witty, funny man, that he never got senile.
Okay, we'll take a few questions from the audience also. Yes, I know you will put up your hand first. But one other point I wanted to mention, which I noticed in this film, you see, when the middle class gets into this kind of a crisis, and there is a kind of dilemma of whether there should be a blame game, whether there should be some fault finding. Everybody is in a defensive kind of mode, right? And the middle class then, irrespective of other differences amongst themselves, the landlord and the tenant or whatever, forges a kind of unity which I feel stems from a kind of insecurity of the law, of the Paramasans or whatever it may be, that this middle class forges a kind of unity to put up a wall of resistance against what might come as accusations against them. This is something I felt through the situations that have been created, not only in this but also from Admin Pradinin, because even the landlord in day-to-day life may be finding fault with the tenant all the while, but when it comes to representing against or giving statements to the police or doing something, where you have to be defending the middle class, there is a strange kind of unity that is being forced. Didn't you find that?
Absolutely. And Minanda he also mentioned this many times, that though they are blaming each other, that you don't have ventilation, you have done this, why haven't you kept you made a mistake, you should have kept the address. No, this is very wrong. They're actually blaming each other. But when it comes to a larger crisis, they are all coming together. In his other films also. And that is something which is very rare with most filmmakers, I think, where blame game, everybody's blaming each other and it's a blame game. There are a lot of films which talk about hypocrisy and blame games, and when everybody is blaming each other, husband blaming the woman, blaming the son blaming the grandfather, dad is blaming the landlord is blaming the tenant. But it's very interesting when directors like Mrinal said come and say that, okay, but when it comes to a larger, bigger crisis, or when it comes to the crisis of their class, rather than their class, they unite. They come together. Then they don't side up with the father. None of them side up with the father. And when the mother goes downstairs, when they forgot about the funeral rites, they only thought about their funeral rites. They only thought about their own purification of the home. But that home also belonged to Pada. That home belongs to all these boys. So that I thought was a brilliant sequence, and which you might have also felt. That when the woman goes down, then everybody's like together, everybody's like, okay, we are all supporting this. They didn't blame the partner. She never for once, because Mamota said that, won't my ladies say that, why did you go to sleep? Why didn't you remember that? And I was, no, she won't say that. You're all together now. And I'm so glad that Mr. Raman has pointed this out. And all this used to happen during the sets, and we used to ask him questions that, should we say this, should we do this? He said, yes, not in front of the policeman, but in front of the policeman you will talk about the bad side. After he's gone, you will talk about something else to your wife. So all these things were happening in the set. Yes, you're absolutely right.
One other observation is also that whether it is Akale Shandane or whether it is this film, you see, this last scene when this boy's father goes up to say goodbye, okay? The climax is built up in such a way you don't know whether he's going to go and slap the guy or whether he's going to break down over there and start crying again, say, give me my son back. But all he does as an anti-climax is just says, Babu Choli, let's all go. So this kind of non-aggression of this particular class, even it hurts somehow, and this again, even in the famine film, Akale Shandane, people died, lakhs and lakhs of people died, but they are not getting violent at any point of time, So there is a respect that this lower class is showing towards the middle class and the upper class, which kind of prevents them into going from aggression, which I find a little strange, because if something happens in a hospital, if this kind of death had happened because of a doctor's negligence, they would go and smash and break up everything in the hospital and so on. But when it happens in a household, in a situation where there are actually kind of providers in some sense, this aggression is somehow absent, that anger is also absent. Why do you think it is like that, that this class accepts their fate in that way also?
I think it is because Haran is still, he has another son, so what does he do with the other son? Haran cannot, Haran needs money, Haran needs survival, all these boys need work. So it would be irresponsible of Haran's father, to do anything more than just saying thank you. It would be irresponsible. So as a human being, he's far above, he's far, and he's shown as that kind of a person. And what MRINAL sir wanted to show is, he wanted to show the respectability of the hungry. He wanted to show that. And unlike his earlier films, where people tear away the things, tear away the food and all, from other people's hands, he wanted to show the respect. Despite hunger, there is a certain respectability which probably ANJAN and Mamata doesn't have, because they shut the door and they forgot about those boys and forgot about Haran, because Haran is a part of his family, of their family. They were more interested in making a bed for Haran, clearing the sitting room, but they forgot about the basic funeral rite. So these are things which I think troubled him. And many years later, when he was almost bedridden, and we used to go and meet him. I used to go just to ensure that he's having his medicines and all, apart from his friends who are here, who used to go often. And we used to talk of films, of which films he liked and things like that. And we used to talk about KHARIJ, and I said, Nanda, I think today I have a better ending for KHARIJ. So he said, what? You think that ending is not so good? I said, no, I have found a better ending. If today we would have done KHARIJ, we should have done that. He said, what? I said, okay, same thing. They come, they knock, they all gather around, and the funeral rite is happening, and then suddenly another person goes up to ANJAN. Haran is watching. So Vyasan almost got up. He said, okay, what do you think? Let me hear this. So I said, no, you follow the way. So, and he goes up slowly. And if Haran doesn't go up, if somebody else goes up, then it becomes portrait. Because Haran is generally portrayed as a very kind man. But if one of the other guys go up, which means that now they're going to cause trouble. So Haran, this fellow is going to defend now, or the uncle or whatever it is. And he goes up, and the same thing happens. ANJAN is he's stepping back, and this man says, I have a daughter, Babu, will you keep him? And
the old cycle starting again.
Yeah.
But a little bit of the old MRINAL Sen also resurfaces towards the end of the film. At the crematorium, the writings on the walls, where he intentionally takes the camera onto those and said, Tomar mrittur bodla amra nebo, the things. So the old MRINAL Sen resurfaces in some way at the end of this film.
Yeah, and actually in our crematorium, people write slogans. They write private slogans. They have, Ma tomake konodin bhulbo na, Baba tumi jekhane thako bhalo theko, Bibhul tor mrittur bodla nebo. So you don't, maybe there is one middle class man who lost his wife, maybe there's a Naxalite who lost his friend. So that is something interesting, and he saw these, he used these slogans.
All right, let's take a few questions. There were a few hands. Yes, go ahead. Not 3 questions, please, yeah? Only 1. Yeah. Oh, can you give them a mic, please? Yeah, you can take this. I thought you had a very...
Thanks, Mr. Raman, for allowing me to offer a couple of questions. So my couple of questions are, the first question is, taking off from where you have left, at the crematorium, where there was, the audience got to feel that there will be a revolt. There will be these people, these masses, Haran and Ganesh and the folks will revolt. I mean, that was the message we got from the scene, from the crematorium. And as they went, after the cremation rites were over, we all were expecting, the audience was expecting some kind of a revolt. But instead of a revolt, there was not even a protest. So don't you think Mrinal Sen promised much but delivered little? He was he too scared of the so-called that bourgeois mind that if he showed this kind of if not a revolt, a protest, the audience would not accept it? That